All right, so let's look at the verb forms. Here's a really useful chart for thinking about verb forms. I've noticed that some of you make errors with the progressive, so some of you are using ing when you're not supposed to. It's very simple to remember. You can't use ing, so writing, unless you have am, is, or are as a verb. Obviously, writing can be used as a noun. That's a different situation. But when you're using it as a verb, you need to have am, like I am writing. She is walking. They were writing. He was walking. We will be writing. They will be walking. Okay? So that's just a rule. If you're using writing, if you're using the present progressive, you want to talk about something happening right now. That's the progressive. Right now, I am writing. Right now, I am writing. And if you want to talk about something that you did over a period of time, she was writing for 3 hours. And you can talk about something that somebody will be doing for a period of time. So they will be walking for 3 hours tomorrow. Or somebody says, what are you doing tomorrow at 3 o'clock? I want to go get coffee. And you'll say, I'm sorry, I will be writing at 3 o'clock tomorrow. You can't say, I will write at 3 o'clock tomorrow, because that implies that you're just doing something very quickly. I will be writing at 3 o'clock tomorrow is when 3 o'clock strikes, I will be writing. I will have started writing at 2 and I will finish writing at 4. So at 3 o'clock, I will be writing. That's why you would use the progressive there. I haven't noticed too many issues with the simple, except for subject-verb agreement. So see how sometimes you can have it with an S, without an S, and sometimes with. So you'd say, I write. When you use I, you don't need the S. And when you use she, she, he, or it, you would use S. So it's I write, she writes. They write, he writes. We write, it writes. Okay? And that's the same for all of the present simple. When you have the past, it doesn't matter. So I wrote, she wrote, they wrote, it wrote, doesn't matter. And then in the future, I will write, she will write, they will write, it doesn't matter. What does matter is when you have had, has, have in the present tense, has or have in the present. So I have, she has. They have, it has. Okay, so all of these, you have these options. These are all subject-verb agreement. So you have to really learn those if you're still making mistakes with subject-verb agreement. And I think most of you are, so I would definitely continue to work on that. All right, so the present perfect, she has written. They have walked. So present perfect talks about something that happened in the past at no certain time. It doesn't really matter when it happened. You don't have to give a specific date or a specific time. It just has happened before. So like, I have been to France 5 times. So that would be, if you have been to France 5 times, it doesn't matter when you went to France. It doesn't matter what year. It doesn't matter how long you were there. You just have been there, right? She has written 3 papers in the last week. So I'm not going to say on Tuesday because that's too specific. She has written 3 papers on Tuesday. Doesn't work. That is a specific time in the past. So if it's a specific time in the past, I'm just going to use the simple past. She wrote 3 papers on Tuesday. But if you're talking about a general time, so like this morning, you can use the present perfect. Like, I have written 3 papers since this morning. Since I woke up this morning. So you can use it with since. You're actually, if you're going to use, you can use the present perfect with since, and if you're going to use recently, you're going to use the present perfect progressive. So recently, I have been eating raw food. And you can use since as well. Since Tuesday, I have been eating raw food. Since Tuesday, I have eaten 5 raw meals. So it's a little more specific if you're using the present perfect. This is just something you have been doing over a period of time, including now, starting in the past up to the present. Okay, so the past tense, the past perfect, it's a little different. So instead of have or has, you're just using had instead. But the past perfect describes something that happened in the past before something else in the past. So I had written 6 pages of my paper before I realized I was supposed to write an annotated bibliography. Right? So that's something that happened in the past before something else in the past. I had written 5 pages before I realized I was not saving them. Right? I had walked for 30 minutes before I realized that I forgot my backpack. So I realized is a moment in the past. Before I realized would be the past perfect. Okay, and then future. So all future sentences will have this. I will have. So you can say, like when you're expressing goals, you can say, by 2020, by 2020, I will have become, so use the past participle, I will have become a famous author. By 2025, I will have written 10 books. It's very ambitious, but maybe that's the case for you. By tonight, I will have walked 6 miles. Before tonight, I will have walked 6 miles. By midnight, I will have finished my paper. So you're talking about the future before a specific time. So if you're talking about the future perfect progressive, you're talking about something that lasts a long time. So by tonight, I will have been writing for 5 hours. By tonight, I will have been walking for 6 miles. So in this case, at midnight, you are still writing. Here, you're at midnight, you've finished writing. By midnight, I will have written 6 pages. By midnight, I will have been writing for 6 hours. This is something that is happening and is still happening at midnight. So it's a progressive action. I had been writing. I had been walking. So this is, again, it's a long-term action. So you can say, before I realized that school was canceled, I had been walking for 30 minutes. So it's something that you had been doing for a period of time. That's the difference. Here, this is not for a period of time. I had walked 3 miles. You can say amount, but not a period of time. I had walked 3 miles before I realized school was canceled. I had been walking for 30 minutes before I realized school was canceled. Okay. All right, so let's look at some examples. For the present tense, in the most recent article, Williams et al. Argue that not enough attention has been paid to the research on the Zika virus. All right. So they argue in their paper. So remember that something in an article, in a text, exists right now, so you can use the present tense. Present progressive. We are finding that the more meat we eat, the worse the environment becomes. We are finding. So this is something that's happening right now, and it isn't concluded. You haven't figured out for sure what's happening, but you are finding that this is happening. So it's not a conclusion, but it's a finding that still has yet to be concluded. Present perfect. In the last decade, finding the best method of teaching coding to children has been of major interest in my field. Has been. In the last decade, it has been of major interest. So you're not saying a specific time, but you can give a general amount of time. So in the last decade is about the last 10 years, it has been of interest. Present perfect progressive. Recently, many students have been showing up to class. Have been showing. All right. You can say lately many students have shown up to class, but recently is more common to use the present perfect progressive. So just the simple past, Williams et al. Originally believed that they would find a cure for the effects of Zika virus, but they did not succeed. They did not succeed. The past perfect. The students had arrived in class before they realized it was canceled. The students had arrived in class. So this is something that happened in the past before something else in the past. So they had arrived before they realized. Realized is the simple past. And this is something that happened before that. Past perfect progressive. She had already been driving to school for an hour before she found out it was canceled. So this is for a specific period of time. She had already been driving to school for an hour before she found out it was canceled. Okay. For the future, we have the present simple. So the paper then calls for future research to be performed. And this is using the passive voice, so it might seem weird. To be performed. The paper then calls. So this is the paper then calls. So this is actually the present tense. And then for future research to be performed, and that's the future. This paper will discuss the power of the black-white binary as a paradigm. Will discuss. This is the future, obviously. All right. Be going to. Only common in if clauses, otherwise use will. So only use be going to in an if clause. If you don't have if in the clause, then use will instead. If a message is going to be a long, complicated utterance, the person doing the messaging will break the utterance into parts. So here, you don't want to say is going to break because it's not an if clause. This is the if clause. Because you have if here, you can use is going to be. There is no if here, so you're going to use will instead. Future in the past. It became clear the National Party would be put out of the majority in the South African Parliament. So this is something that happened before this happened, but everything here is in the past. Right? So it's all in the past, but this is the future of this. It became clear that they would be. Right? So a simpler sentence might be, it became clear to me last week, it became clear to me that on Friday, right, so last Monday, it became clear to me that on Friday, I would be sick, right? So I realized on Monday that by Friday, I would be sick. I would be sick. So using would instead of will. So it's something that happened in the past before something else in the past, but you're expressing the future, not the past perfect, right? So that's why it's a little different. Okay. So you can complete the quiz on the verb forms. This is a review. This should be pretty simple for many of you. If it isn't, then you should be doing some more research on verb forms on your own beyond the class. And let me know if you need any extra resources. Okay. Conditionals. So before you complete the second part of the quiz, which is the conditionals, you should go over this. So real conditionals. Let's look. There are real conditionals and there are unreal conditionals. There are two types of unreal conditionals. So for a real conditional, you can use the present simple, the present progressive, the past simple, the past progressive, and be going to in an if clause. And then in the main results clause, you can say any appropriate past or present tense or future form, especially will, plus modal verbs. We'll look at examples. In the unreal conditional, you can use the past simple or the past perfect. In the main results clause, in the main clause, you can use would, could, might plus the verb if it's past simple. In the past perfect, you can use would, could, might plus have plus the past participle. So let's look at some examples. So conditional clauses are subordinate clauses that usually start with if. Sometimes they start with when or unless. So a real conditional. Real conditionals are used for conditions that have happened, will happen, or always happen. When I go to my friend's house, I usually bring flowers. When I go, this always, right? When I go, so that's why I'm using the simple present. If this change occurs, long-term environmental protection may result. If this change occurs. So this is talking about the future. A possibility for the future. Unreal Form 1, the hypothetical, describes conditions that might exist in the future. If our planet faced the same direction as it revolves around the sun, we would have 6 months of daylight. Okay. Let's look here. So you can use the past simple. If our planet faced, we would. And then here. So if our planet faced, we would. So this is a good example of this conditional form. Here we have, more people would have died if the vaccine had not been made available. So we have the past perfect. More people would have died. This is the main clause. Would have died is the past participle. And then here's the if clause. If the vaccine had not been made available. Had not been. This is the past perfect. So right here, past perfect in the if clause is if the vaccine had not been made available. And then the main clause is would have died. Would have died. Okay. When I go to my friend's house, I usually bring flowers. So when I go is the present simple, talking about something that happens. And then this is just any appropriate past or present tense. So it's a little more vague. This is very specific, and this is a little more vague with what you can do. There are more options. If this change occurs, long-term environmental protection may result. Just make sure that the tense in this clause, in the main clause, makes sense with the tense in the if clause. Right. Most style guides discourage using will and would in the if clause, although spoken English permits them. So the correct form is, if this change occurs, long-term environmental protection may result. The incorrect would be, if this change will occur. Just use occurs, the present, and it expresses the future. So another correct one is, even if the engine failed, the rotor would continue to turn. So you can use would in the main clause, just not in the if clause. Even if the engine would fail. That doesn't make sense. So you don't want to use will or would modals in the if clause. Only use them in the main clause. So remember we said here, up here, would, could, might are in the main clause, not in the if clause. Okay. One common use of conditionals in academic writing is to explain a situation, real or hypothetical, that would make a claim true. Old deep water can be removed relatively easily if it is transported southward. So this is a situation that would make a claim. So this is the situation that would make this claim true, right? So this is a claim. Old deep water can be removed relatively easily. This is a claim. And this is the condition that would make it true if it is transported southward. Not northward, southward. Okay, if our planet faced the same direction as it revolves around the sun, we would have 6 months of daylight and a 6-month summer. So this is the condition, and this is the claim. And it's unreal because it can't happen. Oops. Conditionals can also hedge claims by introducing restrictions that may make the statement true or false. So if this is true, pesticide use could increase susceptibility to intestinal parasites, hepatitis, malaria, and respiratory infections. So you're introducing a restriction that may make the statement true or false. If this is true, pesticide use could increase susceptibility. So this is making a claim, but using a conditional. You have a condition to that claim. The superstring theory of everything, if discovered, would be yet another so-called law of the universe. Notice we have a lot of modals. Would, could, might, were, if I were. There's a song by Justin Bieber that says, if I was your boyfriend. That is not correct. It should be, if I were your boyfriend. So if you're using an if clause, you need to use the correct form of the verb. Not was, but were. If I were. If they were. And then here, you could say correctly, if this were true. But this is talking about something that could be true in the present right now. So that's why the person is using is here. They're using would here because it isn't true and it isn't true yet. It isn't true right now, so you're not going to use is. The final function is a concessive, which describes two opposite points of view without saying that either is wrong. This is good for if you're talking about a debate. The sanctions, in practice, if not intent, contribute to a shortage of printing material. So in practice and in intent, these are two views, and you're using them in the conditional clause. This is a really formal way of using it. You don't need to if it's confusing. Even if such studies prove to be of minor educational significance, they may still have scientific importance. So even if they don't have any significance, they may still be important. So this is another way that a conditional clause can be used. So I hope these examples helped you see how you can use conditionals. If you have more questions about conditionals, please let me know, and I will help you find some more resources.